Hey everyone, I'm here with voice actor and improv expert straight from Toronto, Ontario, Adrian Truss. Mr. Truss, how are you this evening?
I'm great. We're cold, but managing.
Oh yeah, definitely.
What's it like up there?
Well, same kind of weather, sort of, lots of snow. It's not fun clearing that.
Now, are you actually in Ottawa?
Yes I am. It's very cold. I'd assume it's very similar kind of weather patterns from place to place.
Yeah, probably.
But I guess I can get into the questions now if you're ready to start.
Absolutely.
So, first question, what got you into voice acting or acting in general and improv?
Well, those are three relatively distinct areas of basically theater. I've always been an actor, what we would call a legitimate stage actor, since my early days. And then at one point in my career, I started working with Second City in Toronto, which you probably know is sort of an improv-based house of comedy. I'd always done improvisation in my theater work and in my directing and in other ways, so it seemed like a natural fit, and that's how I got into the improvisational comedy business or aspect of it. Voice acting sort of came out of that after I left Second City, and several years later. The characters that I had been creating in my improvisational comedy gave me a sort of a basis to get into voice acting, because I had created many characters along the way, and most of them were vocally distinct.
Oh, interesting. So, when you do a voice acting role, how do you prepare for it? Do you have specific voices that you have set up, or do you have sort of a thing, like you have a method for each individual character? Like, do you have some characters who have similar voices, or?
Well, usually the job has come about through an audition process, and when you audition for the role, you're given some parameters that you try to meet, like maybe an accent, maybe an age. Several different parameters, and then you use your basic abilities, or whatever they may be, to fulfill those functions, and then you do your audition, and if you're fortunate enough to score the role, then you can spend some time with the director, usually on the first day of recording, where you fine-tune the voice that you're using.
Oh, that's very interesting. Now, from your voice acting roles, do you have a favorite that you've done so far?
There are several shows that I've enjoyed working on, particularly, I suppose. Certainly Jane and the Dragon would be one of those, where I played the dragon, and that sort of gave me a chance to do a kind of an English thing that I enjoyed, and the stories were very well written. So that was fun. Rolie Polie Olie was a good one, in that I got to do a couple of different characters on that. The character of the Uncle Giz, who was kind of an Elvis kind of voice, that was fun to do.
Oh yeah, yeah, he was one of my favorites that I remember when watching the show.
Yeah, he was fun because he was kind of a kibitzer, so he didn't have to do because it was a fairly traditional show. The mom and dad were very traditional, more or less, and the uncle was kind of a misfit, so he was fun.
Oh yeah.
The part of Armand, the Sasquatch in Camp Lake Bottom, was fun. That was kind of an over-the-top sort of theatrical kind of character, so that permitted me a lot of leeway in sort of doing stuff. Yeah, those would probably be my top three, I would think, probably. Although, I mean, with minor exceptions, pretty much much any show that you work on, if it's well written and well directed, it's a lot of fun.
Oh, well, that's excellent. An excellent answer, I must say. Is there a voice that you're particularly recognized a lot for?
No, I wouldn't say so. I'm sort of a go-to guy, mostly in advertising commercials. I'm sort of the go-to guy to do kind of 30s and 40s radio announcer kind of guys. I can do that fairly effectively, and so I'm quite often brought in to do that kind of thing. Other than that, not really. I have a couple of voices that I use in different shows, and they've kind of fit the bill.
Oh, that's very interesting. Now, another question I've had is that you've gotten into acting, but you've also written and directed several stage shows. What was it like working on those and writing and directing?
Yeah, those writing and directing are sort of my passions. I mean, I enjoy the voice work certainly, and it pays the bills. But working in live theater is substantially different than that, and so that's kind of what I enjoy doing the most. Writing plays, I haven't written a lot. I've done like 4 or 5 sort of one-act plays, and directed those mostly, and have directed other people's work. And that's an ongoing. I mean, it's a large. When you're directing a show, certainly it's a large and lengthy process, and you're working with a lot of different people. When you're writing, of course, you're writing on your own generally. So that's a different kind of process.
Right. Now, another question is that, as mentioned before, you've done a lot of improv work. Is there any specific work with improv or a certain set that you've done that you've found very memorable, or do you have a favorite moment when doing improv?
Well, the nature of improvisation is such that if it's going well, it's a lot of fun and very exciting. If it's not going well, then it's a bit of a struggle. But I wouldn't say that there were specific. I mean, it's hard to remember because it's all so ethereal. You do this stuff and then it's pretty much gone because it's improvisation. So unless it happened to be recorded on video or something, then generally speaking, you don't remember. I've had people come up to me and say, oh, they saw me like whatever 10 years ago, and particularly like this scene about the bear and the princess or something, and they'll go on about it, but I won't remember it. There's just too much to remember of that kind. I suppose one interesting anecdote would be that my troupe, Illustrated Men, was hired to play for an evening at a restaurant called the Pearl it's in Markham, I think. And when we got there, we found out that it was a Chinese restaurant, and it was a Chinese restaurant that catered to Chinese, so virtually no one there spoke English. So when we arrived and found that out, we realized that we wouldn't be able to do our regular kind of material. And then one of our members, Bruce, remembered having heard this Chinese folk tale years ago, and he quickly told us basically what happened in that folk tale, and we improvised it in front of the crowd. And when they saw it, the Chinese people, Chinese, I guess probably Chinese Canadians mostly, but speaking Chinese, they recognized it and were fascinated by our take on it.
Wow, so that is improvisation to the extreme. You're improvising a story that you just heard. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's when you've got a storyline like that kind of in front of you, then actually it's almost easier. It's like if I described I don't know, the story of Robin Hood to you, and then you improvised it, you would know that, some details about it. Mutually, you would know details about it. So in this case, it was a fortunate save,
Wow, well, that's amazing. Now, in regards to your group, the Illustrated Men, what's it like working with you work with Bruce Hunter and David Hubbard. What's it like working with them? How's what goes into planning for a show?
Well, it's Hugh Band, actually, Dave Huband. We got together a long time ago, and in 1987, actually, we were all working at Second City at one point, and then all came to be not working at Second City, and decided to get together and form a group that we ostensibly we were going to be writing. That was our goal, was to write industrial work and that sort of thing. And then we were using improvisation as a way of fleshing out some of this material. And then we realized that the act as an improvisational act was getting more attention than the writing aspect. So we concentrated on that, and then spent the next 30 years doing that. Typically, our show, we do 2 sets, about 40 to 45 minute sets of improvisation based on audience suggestion that we take at the beginning of the show. We'll do those 2 sets, and we'll mix in some written stuff and some musical stuff along the way. We usually work with a musical director, keyboard player. So we'll talk about it before the show, usually over dinner or something, and we'll discuss some stuff that we want to do, and that'll get written down, but the rest is just sort of working off audience suggestion.
Oh, that's interesting to hear. Do you often get requests from people who've come to your show several times on maybe they've seen the show once and they remember a certain sort of set you've done? Do they sometimes request for you to do the same set again or a similar kind of set?
No, not typically. We might get I don't know, if we usually ask questions like something along the lines of what's the strangest thing you've ever found in your closet, that kind of thing. And so if they hear a question that has been asked before and it's gotten a big reaction, whatever the suggestion was, they might say it again. But no, more typically we get suggestions that we hear from one group or another. It's just coincidental, but some things people generally go for, but not specifically things that we've done before.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's very interesting to hear. And what would you consider to be, for someone who would be going into improv, what would be the one thing that you'd want to suggest for them to do to prepare?
You mean if they were considering taking classes or something, or if they were just going to jump in?
A little of both.
Listening is the biggest thing. You have to train yourself to listen and not to try to control the scenario that you're in, whatever it might be. So listening to what's being said by your other actors is very important, and also to be to what we call yes-anding, which is somebody says something to you, and in your head you're going yes, and I will add to that, rather than negating it. Or like if someone came in and said, "Oh, look at that big wall," and you said, "No, that's not a wall. It's a fish," or whatever. That's not going to go anywhere. But if the person says, "Look at the size of that wall," and you say, "Yeah, let's try to get over it," or something, then you have somewhere to go. So it's a case of being of positive reinforcement, right?
Right. That's very helpful and interesting to hear. And the last thing I wanted to ask you. Well, I have 2 more questions, but you've done some improv work with Tony Rosado, who was also a member of Second City for a while, and he sadly passed away in January of 2017. What was it like working with him?
With Tony, was have you seen his work?
Yes, I have.
So you know his characters are very well constructed, and working with Tony was different than, say, working with my current partners, in that the work we do, generally the characters that we do and create, are very, what you might call I don't know, over the top. They're larger than life characters, and generally that we do. Whereas Tony's work was usually based more on real personalities. Like he would, for instance, if he was improvising a taxi driver, it wouldn't be a crazy taxi driver. It would be a taxi driver that was believable and had whatever his foibles were the source of the comedy, as opposed to making jokes per se. He was very character driven in his work, and very dedicated to it.
Right. Well, that's very interesting to hear. And the last question I have to ask is, whether it being acting or voice acting, what's your favorite part of being an actor?
The favorite part of being an actor. Well, it's hard to answer that in one thing. I mean, it depends on the nature of the thing that you're doing. If you're doing a written stage show, say, and it's a good show and you're enjoying the show, then it's the reaction of the audience. Obviously, is the greatest part of it, especially in comedy, of course. I mean. In drama, of course, there's not that much audience reaction, but you can still feel them. But in comedy, if you're getting laughs with intentional laughs, then that's pretty satisfying overall when you consider the amount of work that you put into doing it. And really, I mean, paychecks or whatnot aside, the important thing is your connection with the audience, and when that connection is really happening, and you're really connected with them and with your fellow performers, that's pretty special,
Yeah, I agree. That must be a great feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the last thing I want to ask before I end this off, and this might be a little much, but would you be able to maybe demo some of the voices that you would do for your animation or your improv for me?
Yeah, if I had something to read here. Hold on a sec. This is a book that our group, Illustrated Men, has just brought out. It's called Illustrated Men's Group. So I'm going to read from that. I'll read in one voice. This is kind of an Ed Keane kind of Ed Wynn rather kind of voice that you may or may not recognize. It goes something like "We have recently received a copy of a letter that you wrote to one Alex Peabody of Canada. It was forwarded to us by a Mr. Adrian Truss, the Undersecretary for Tourism at the Canadian Consulate here in Beijing."
Wow.
That's a kind of one kind of voice. Talking earlier about the kind of 30s, 40s kind of sound, that would kind of be like, "Yeah, but quite frankly, I'm very worried. I have searched the house and all of its usual haunts, the Tate Gallery, the Museum of Modern History, and the London Library, to no avail. I even went down to the food bank, where he volunteers every other day."
Wow, that's amazing.
So I'm just reading that out of this book that we wrote. Yeah, so I mean, generally speaking, I mean, I develop the voice depending on the nature of the character. If he's like, there's a general that I used to do in a show. What was it called? Donkey Kong. Did this character called General Klump, and he talks sort of like foghorn leghorn.
Oh yes, I remember him.
Yeah, so there you go. There's a few.
Well, I just want to say thank you very much for partaking in this interview. You
Pleasure.
and you can find I'll hopefully have it on under the description of where I'll be putting this. You can find Mr. Truss at through Illustrated Men, which is the improv group that he works with. And thanks again for this interview, and thanks for everyone for listening.
Thank you, Gio. It was a pleasure.